Our guest this morning is Dr. Sue Morter. She's an international speaker, master of bioenergetic medicine and quantum field visionary. Dr. Sue utilizes the embodiment of high-frequency energy patterns to activate full human potential. So if you're one of those people this morning that don't feel that you are living up to the full potential and greatness that is within you, this is a conversation that you absolutely want to stay on point for. Our guest this morning, again, Dr. Sue Morter. The book is entitled The Energy Codes, the 7-Step System to Awakening Your Spirit, Heal Your Body, and Live Your Best Life. Dr. Sue, good morning and welcome to the OPT Network.
Good morning. It's a delight to be here.
So the book takes us, Dr. Sue, into a very deep place, and you start by talking about your own revelation one day when you were meditating. Take us back to that moment in time.
Certainly. I was in a state of meditation, which was something I was seeking because of tremendous stress levels in my life, being a perfectionist and trying to do the right thing, being responsible for a clinic and doctors and patients and traveling and speaking. And I sought meditation as a sense of relief. And in the midst of that, I was transcended into another version of who I was. I was me, but I wasn't in a physical body. I was a big ray of light that was spanning the distance between what we would reference as some otherworldly space and all the way here to this physical dimension. It was quite life-changing for me and rattled my mind as far as my perspective of who we are and what we're doing here.
And so for a lot of people, including myself, when I read that, I wanted to know the depths of what that meant. Was that a metaphorical place? Was that a real place out of body? What was it exactly, as best as you can explain it?
Yes, I know. It felt more real than when I look around here. When I came back into this regular walking state, this world looked flat like a photograph would look relative to the multidimensionality that my mind had opened up to. Now, when I have read experiences of out-of-body and near-death experiences that people have had and written some lovely books about, the experiences were very similar. And that's what drew me into researching a little bit more about what had happened. What was I accessing? What is this multi-dimensional realm that so many have written about or spoken about? And so it felt every bit as real as me sitting here speaking with you.
And so for a lot of people who maybe have not followed your work, you really write about in the book not really having a deity in your life, but being more science focused, and this sort of changing that. Let's talk about that.
I knew in that moment that there was a realm beyond this one. Now, science was in my life, and yet a reference and a reverence to nature was also. And I've always known, I had always felt that there was a higher being, a higher realm, and a God of sorts, as each of us, seek to have a solution or an answer or a reference to. And yet this direct experience with the space that felt divine was a definite new revelation in my life.
And did that revelation make you hungry to seek out the divinity and what that was and what that meant to your life?
So much so, I turned my life into a living laboratory for the next 10 years, trying to find ways to access that again. What was it that happened and why did it happen? And what was I supposed to do with it as a clinician that was trying to help people heal and being very effective in doing so, yet knowing that there was something more, always feeling that there was something missing or something that we were supposed to access or have a greater sense of experiencing rather than just walking around in faith. So I began bridging these worlds of deep spirituality and what science is showing us now with the newer perspectives that quantum science is bringing in and that epigenetics is bringing to the conversation about who we are and how we function and what is really happening here.
And so most people, and I have spoken to a couple of authors on this journey that have had out-of-body experiences. In both of those cases, they were traumatic instances that happened, that death was imminent. But in your case, it was a level of meditation that took you there. Talk about what meditation had meant to you before you reached this epic realm of really finding and facing a source higher and greater than yourself.
I had not been a long-term meditator. In fact, these experiences started opening up immediately the moment I began to meditate. And what we know about meditation is that it is a slowing of the mind until the mind stills. The thinking, story writing, worrying, fretting mind, that aspect of our mental selves is very busy. I liken it to the rapid moving blades of a ceiling fan. And our true essence is not that. It's rather slow and methodical. And so this rapid moving ceiling fan and this slower moving version of us, when the mind slows enough, we can move out through it. Prior to that, we would never stick our fingers through the rapid, blades of a fan that was moving for fear of hurting ourselves. And so this is what happens with our mind. When it's moving so fast, we cannot experience ourselves as this true presence that we really are at our deep essential level. And so as I was experiencing this, I recognized that this is the truth of who we are. And when people are having near-death experiences or out-of-body experiences, that rapid moving thinking mind is also stilled for different reasons, either impairment or an inability to continue to function and think as rapidly as we would have been had circumstances been typical. And so both situations allow us the opportunity to have the mind be stilled and the observing mind to come forward and for us to experience a different version of life because of it.
And so in this different version, and I really had to, I think for me, when I read the book, you have to really read it through a spiritual lens. Otherwise, you'll miss it. Because when you start talking about your real self, you're talking about not the flesh that we're housed in, but the spirit. And so you're talking about tapping into the spirit realm. And what you've done for the sake of this conversation in this book, if I'm reading it the way that I think that I am, or if I'm interpreting it the way that I think that I am, is that you have brought science, being a doctor, being a chiropractor, into alongside the spirit man, and really trying to blend those two together, and for us to make that higher connection to come out of ourselves and into the spirit. Is that what you were sharing with us in the book?
Yes, in a sense, we develop a personality along the way, and as we do so, we become identified as that. And that personality tends to be reactive to the circumstances that we grew up in, responsive to life as we become rational thinking adults and make our way in the world. And oftentimes, those ways of being have been a compensation for a wholeness that actually resides underneath that might not have been experienced given our early lifetime experiences. And so when we base a version, an identity of ourselves upon our external circumstances, there is the possibility that we are missing some points of our greatness, of our magnificence, of our true value, that were never allowed to become animated or to become accessed given the circumstances that we were raised in or that we began believing in along the way. And so as we drop back underneath that personality and begin to feel and sense a greater sense of our wholeness, many of these aspects of our thinking, rational, behaving self start to take on a different perspective. And we begin to see that there may be an opening for us that we never really saw as possible before.
And when you talk about awakening your spirit, a lot has to happen for you to get there. You write in the book that you became a chiropractor because your dad was a chiropractor. And a lot of the work that you did had to do with loving the work, but also about pleasing your dad. Tell us about that time in your life when it was all about pleasing your dad, furthering his work, and just really being a student of your dad's energy and his work.
Mm. Well, I was definitely a student of his work and had observed him generating miraculous results with people that were really unheard of. In fact, while I was in so much respect for him, I actually went to school to study psychology. And as I was studying about cases that I was going to have to medicate or refer, I would go home on the weekends and hear about him being able to help the exact same cases, those kinds of circumstances, without medication or these types of externally oriented solutions. And so I became interested again in his work and decided to go into chiropractic because I wanted to impact people as largely as I could by as natural of a means as possible. And so in doing that, I definitely felt his response and his respect and his regard for moving into his work. And then as I delved into his work, I gained a tremendous respect for what he was able to do. So the rapport was based on the results that he was getting and an understanding about life that we do have the capacity to heal, and that we do, if the nervous system is operating the way that it is built to operate and we allow it to, the body is a self-healing mechanism. And so is the mind, if it is able to operate the way it is truly intended to operate. But what happens in our lives is that we get identified as the mind, and this is a painful thing. Most people, if they are stressed, they are identifying with their mind, with the thinking, rational, action-taking version of themselves. And so things like stress and depression and these types of anxieties that result from an overuse of that aspect of who we are, not having access or an understanding that there is more to me than my thinking mind, that I can just be in the stillness and be in the silence and feel a greater sense of self than I do when I'm in my head and thinking stories and writing stories about the intentions of people and life and my circumstances. And so through meditation, one of the things that happens is people become identified with another version of themselves. They can watch their mind. They can observe their mind, writing stories about things and filling in the blanks when they don't really know the answers. They just start assuming. And when we live from that place, we generate typically pain in our lives in some way. And so what I found was that if people were in pain, whether it was physical pain, mental or emotional pain, or even having a spiritual crisis of some sort, it was basically because they were identified as the thinking mind and not really in touch with the wholeness of their being.
And so when you talk about identified with the thinking mind, so is that when you make that disconnect out of the mind and you come into the spirit realm?
It is an adding on to more than a disconnect.
Okay.
We do need to stand up out of the seat of the mind and sit down in the seat of the essential self. And that essential self I reference in the book as the soulful self, as it represents the wholeness of our being, which includes our mind, but is not limited to our mind.
And there's the dichotomy, isn't it? It is our mind and it includes our mind, but it's not our mind.
There's more to it than just our mind.
More to.
There's more to us than just our mind. There is our intuition, our gut feeling. There is our deep sense of knowing that has really no explanation. Many of us have had these kinds of experiences where we just know something is true, even though our intellectual mind has not been taught that to be true, or someone has not validated it for us from the external world. But we know in our heart of hearts, or we know in our deep core wisdom self, that something is right for us or something is not right for us, even beyond logic or beyond what the masses are doing. It is this part of ourselves that we really have to become greater acquainted with, so that we don't confuse the smart idea as the only idea for us, that we have the faith and the trust and the belief in ourselves to take action based upon what our deep sense of knowingness is telling our conscious mind. What's rising up to our awareness is more than what our educated mind has been taught. It's that the soulful essential self is more than just our linear, rational thinking mind.
And so what you wrote about after you had the experience, this incredible spiritual experience in meditation, was the word surrender, a word that we all try to deal with every single day. And you said once you were able to surrender, you began to see life changes. Talk about that.
Yeah, I think that we're so afraid to surrender because the thinking mind doesn't know what it's surrendering to. And we don't want to surrender to something that could steer us in a direction that is less fulfilling or less life enhancing in some way. Or if we've generated a life that we've generated and it might not qualify for our authentic life, the one that we're actually capable of living, we're afraid of letting go of what we have created and generated. And what I want everyone to realize is that the only thing that we are surrendering to is a greater version of ourselves. Our thinking mind is surrendering to our current life circumstances plus other aspects of who we could be if we would allow it to be true, if we could allow ourselves to soften those beliefs that we've been counting on. For instance, someone might believe that they're never going to be able to get the promotion, or they're never going to be able to find a love in their life that they could share their life with. It may be an inherent belief based upon past experience that they've been hurt before. Why should I try again? I've been duped before on the job. Why should I even go for it? And we kind of carve this idea of reality into a shape that is familiar but might not be fulfilling. It might be miserable, but because it's familiar, we stick to it. We keep running on those sets of circuits so that we can pretty much predict what tomorrow is going to bring because we have a history that we can count on. We can have a sense of safety based upon the likelihood, the statistics of what my future is likely to be based upon my past. And what this invitation is to allow people to recognize there is more to you than your past experiences and the conclusions that we have drawn from them. And there is a greater possibility available to us to love and to live more freely, and to not worry about being hurt by the circumstances that are occurring as we develop a deeper sense of self, which is a trust in a friendly universe, and a trust that things are truly in my favor for me to awaken to my greatest version of myself.
And so when we start to get there, all of this is under the guise of circuitry. And so it shouldn't be this deep, but it really is deep when you talk about coming out of yourself in your natural state of thinking and coming into the soulful self. And you call that in the book the circuitry, and really connecting with that. How do you help people, Dr. Sue, to bridge the natural, I guess, along with the spiritual, or excuse me, the science and the spiritual?
Certainly, we have developed this externally oriented version of life where we need validation from the outer world, from people. We need validation from science. We have externalized our power, our focus, our attention. And what this book is doing is creating an invitation for us to reference our internal world, our internal heart of hearts, and our deep gut knowing, and our internal truth, that sense of self that has kind of gotten lost and thrown under the bus, if you will, as we've progressed in life and tried to make the advancement in our careers or in our lives, et cetera. And so what the book is doing is creating an invitation and a way for people to start to sense and feel, to come back home for themselves, rather than being identified with this version of ourselves. You know, I was really surprised in life to recognize that the ego not only represents the idea that someone thinks that they're better than someone else, but that it also represents that they would have any kind of impression that they are less than someone else, or less than capable, or less than smart enough, or young enough, or strong enough to do what they truly deeply desire to do. And so we build neurocircuitry synapses that affirm these beliefs that we walk around with as either being better than or less than something. And when we're bridging the worlds of science and spirituality, with quantum science on the forefront of our attention these days, what it is showing us is that we are truly in harmony with the whole of creation, that we are not better than or less than, that we are nature itself. And so as we allow ourselves to be equal to the task that is at hand, we start to show up differently in life. And so the circuitry in the book is referencing a way to develop a new set of synapses that happen in our nervous system because of energy running through our system differently. We're learning how to move energy in the body with this book. We're learning how to move the energy of our wisdom and connect it with the energy of our loving selves, and connect that with the energy of our educated self. And as those energies start to blend and mix together, what happens is the nervous system starts to pick up on a different version of who we are. And we land with a different sense of self, one that is more confident, one that is more capable, one that feels more okay. And the mind doesn't even really know how we got to a better feeling of self, because it didn't happen through the thinking mind. I didn't unpack the story of my life. I just got in touch with the version of myself that feels okay regardless of what's going on in the outer world. So by starting to reference my inner world, I start to develop a sense of self.
And so let's talk about energy for people who really are not in tune to what that means. What does the energy, moving the energy, and the quantum science of that, what does that really mean?
Sure. You know, everyone has experienced this. They just don't know that they've experienced what quantum science is validating for us today. When you've been in a situation that was upsetting to you, and you got a knot in your stomach, or a lump in your throat, or tightness in your chest, you've already experienced something like quantum science impacting epigenetics, impacting energy flow, bioenergetics in your body. Now, there's some big words,
Absolutely.
but all it means is that when you think a thought, your body has a physiological response to it. And that physiological response is a reflection of how you believe yourself to be, given the circumstance that you're in. If you know that you're okay when someone says something, it doesn't affect you. If you don't know that you're okay and someone says the same thing, it will affect you like a knot in your stomach, a lump in your throat, tightness in your chest. It has a threatening effect on you. And that's because we don't have a strong sense of self, regardless of what other people or places or circumstances are doing, or what's happening, or what's unfolding in our lives, in our culture, in our community, etc. So we're wanting to establish a deeper understanding that I have control over the energetics of my life instead of allowing the outer world to have control over the energetics of my life. And so when we start to master our ability to do that, we start to feel a sense of okayness, even when someone at work or someone in a leadership role or someone in my life does or says something that just doesn't agree with me. It doesn't have a personal impact that flattens me. Instead, I find an ability to respond to it with strength and clarity and compassion because I don't feel threatened under those same circumstances that used to, bowl me over, overwhelm me in some way.
Mm-hmm. And so you talk about in the book, and I've referenced this before, how you were so connected to your dad and your dad's work, and your ego was that you were not enough, not good enough. At what moment, or was there a moment when you began to be okay, where those feelings that you felt had a sense of I'm okay and he's okay, and I don't have to live up to any of these standards for me to be okay?
Yes. Beautiful question. Thank you. And what happened was in the moment that I had that big awakening, that reality was shifted. I didn't know it until I began to embody that reality, until I could integrate what happened in that
And
transcendent.
how did you embody it? And when you say embody, do you mean that now you're able to walk in it? Now you're able to own it? Now you're able to live in it?
Yes, exactly that.
Okay.
Exactly that. So as I began to question what was happening inside of me when I had that transcendent experience that allowed me to feel my completeness and my wholeness in that moment, I knew there was another version of me that I had never known. I'd been living as someone who wasn't enough, who was always trying to live up to measure up to. And then I instantly had this experience of myself that was whole and complete. And there was nothing broken and nothing missing and nothing wrong. And then I spent years trying to recreate that experience in this everyday walking life. And I figured out how to do it. As I figured out how to do that, that's what I started teaching my patients and sharing in my treatment rooms. And that's what I wrote about in the book, so that everyone could have that experience of accessing that transcendent version of themselves that isn't a compensation for the life you've been living, but is based in your wholeness that was there all along, but we were never aware of it because we hit the ground running trying to please the people who were raising us, the teachers, the coaches, the parents, everyone around us that had the rules, that understood life, that were trying to show us the way things were, and they were giving us a perspective that was limited on their own right, and our take on it was also limited because of our fear or our hurt or our sense of abandonment or a loneliness that we had established along the way. So it's about bridging those worlds and allowing the personality to have greater access to the soulful self, the one that is whole. If you just think of it as our wholeness, when we speak about spirituality, we're speaking about what is the true wholeness of humanity. Who are we in our greatest state? And that's how we reference our spiritual selves, the parts of us that are more complete than our personalities. And that's what we're surrendering. Mm-hmm. We're surrendering our personality selves to this greater version of ourselves that has been there all along, but we weren't aware of it because we were so busy trying to do the things that we thought we were supposed to be doing.
In the natural realm instead of in the spiritual realm.
Yes, and we want the two worlds to become one. Mm-hmm. And that's the point. That we live a spiritual life here in the physical reality, and that we allow this physical world to be a spiritual world that we're living in, not just something we're trying to survive, but rather something we're celebrating.
Right, and you talk about really having heaven here on earth when you make that connection.
Yes, that we wait for some better world to be available to us. And if we could allow to see life as a spiritual practice, that how do I forgive and how do I embrace and how do I surrender to my own greatness and how do I make sense out of the things that have occurred in my life that just shouldn't have happened or felt like they shouldn't happen to people in general? How do I reconcile that? That's what I'm wanting to give people tools to access the answers, their answers to those kinds of questions that seem to matter most in life at the end of the day.
Absolutely. If you are interested in having a deeper look and a deeper dive into self and finding that soulful, spiritual part of yourself, this is a book that you absolutely can't just read through. It's almost like you have to take it in bite-sized pieces because you get so connected with all of your life, or that's what it did for me. You take a look back on all of your life, where you came from and where you are, and how you can present the best part of yourself for me as it pertains to God and what He wants for me to do on this earth. And that's what this book did for me. And I believe that it will unlock the code for many people. It's called The Energy Codes, the 7-step system to awaken your spirit, heal your body, and live your best self. Tell people how they can connect with you, Dr. Sue, get the book, and all of the resources that you have available.
Certainly. I teach live coursework and take people by the hand to walk them through this kind of process if they are interested in that. They can find the book, of course, at the major bookstores around the country. They can come to my website, drsuemorter.com. It's drsuemorter.com, and see all kinds of references, support materials to facilitate this entire process. And the book, of course, is available there too.